welcome back to Imperfect, the Heart-Centered Leadership Podcast. Just delighted to be in season 5. I can't believe it's been 5 years and we have interviewed over 300 amazing heart-centered leaders. And today I want to welcome Ari Tulla to the show. So Ari, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you, Deb. Great to be here.
Your story is near and dear to my heart. So before you introduce yourself, I want to tell you the connection that we have. So I come from the medical rehab world, and I used to look after people with spinal cord injuries, brain injuries as a neurotrauma case manager. And then I was given 5 executives who were off work on stress claims. And I took on 3 VPs and 2 CEOs. And from the date of that phone call to 10 months later, I lost all 5 of those executives to cancer. So when I read your story and realized it was kind of an eye-opening message for you and you were going to do something about it, I thought your message would be so powerful to all the executives and our listenership. And that's why I wanted you on the show, because you chose to do something. So tell our listeners a little bit about you.
Yeah, happy to. So I'm a Finn, living in California for the last 16 years now. And since I was a kid, I've been a builder, from the Legos, from the computer code and games to today, last 25 years building companies. So I've been very fortunate to be able to be involved in some of the moments in the world that really changed the world a little bit, at least. So I was there when the internet happened, mid-90s, early on. Before the websites were invented, I was building games already in the platform. Later, I was able to be a part of the team at Nokia who built the first smartphone before iPhone and Android. And for the last 15 years, I've been able to be part of kind of the healthcare transformation that we move from the old paper world into the digital world. And now, of course, the biggest one maybe to come is the AI. Every day working with AI, different tools, try to think about how we can use those in the world of health. And it's been really interesting, and learned a lot in the last 25 years by building companies.
Absolutely. And I know that you've had some health scares in your life. And my first leadership question was, I love using the term drawing the line in the sand. What was it about auditing your own health and where you're at in your life that kind of catapulted you into your entrepreneurship, your background, your love of building things to make a change within healthcare, right down to the food that we eat?
Yeah, I think we are all looking for the meaning, and you can get excitement and pleasure in life in many different ways.
Yeah.
But I think the recipe for happiness usually is that you have something to do that has a meaning to you. It's up to you. It's not your neighbor or your mom or your friend or your spouse. It's you. You have to fulfill that. And you also need to have love around you. And then you need to have some autonomy. You need to be able to decide what you do with your time. Those are kind of the things that make us happy. It's not very complicated. But in the end, I think, having a drive, having something meaningful to work on is quite valuable. And of course, we invent that meaning in ourselves. It's not, again, external thing. It has to be your thing. And many of us work and do things because of the external factors. And those often don't make us happy. They make us feel drained and tired. So for me, my story goes down a long time, almost 25 years ago, when my wife had a thyroid tumor out of nothing, like a 20-year-old woman, very healthy, athletic, and suddenly has like a fist-sized tumor on her neck. And that's taken away, and part of the thyroid goes with it. And that medically was a success. Like there was no, cancer or anything beyond that. It was taken away, she was healed. But at the same time, she was succumbed into complicated autoimmune diseases, hormonal imbalances, and we had a verdict that we can never have a family. Mm-hmm. So you find the love of your life, and then you get this verdict early on that you can never, have kids. And that's a tough thing to do and cope with. So we decided to, see if we could reversed that. And we spent about 10 years of our life on trying to find a solution. We spent time in Europe and then later in the US and had many doctors we worked with, went to East and Western medicine, mindfulness, nutrition. And finally, we had a great doctor who was able to navigate with us and help with the diet that is helping to lower inflammation in the body. Similar diet is now used on ALS even, and many of the autoimmune diseases. We were one of the first people to test these things out, and it did work. It took a year, but her body was able to heal itself. We were able to get to our medication, and then finally we were able to get and build a family. It took many years. We had to go IVF, and we lost our first son, and a lot of drama. But in the end, now we have a family. We have a 9-year-old son, 5-year-old daughter, and those are of course the blessing of our life. And meanwhile, doing that, it gave me this epiphany that this is very impactful, because when you are healthy and young and healthy, you don't really think about that stuff. It doesn't matter to you. But I was thinking, mortality, death at the young age. And now, of course, with the COVID, many of us been seeing, death. We have a family member or loved one who died. That hasn't happened often. And we're maybe a bit closer to that world. And we may think more now about our own health, like what can we do to be proactive about living good life. And that became kind of my calling 15 years ago. And I started to build healthcare companies. And I focused first decade in area of how do you help people access healthcare. We couldn't always find the right doctor. That's one reason why we lost our son. And I wanted to build a company that can help people find a doctor. And it started from my problem and my wife's problem. And today that company and the companies that it came to be help 100 million people a year. So it's pretty cool that, your own problem is now been enhanced to be such a big deal. And now for the last, few years, I've been working in nutrition, a world I really know a lot about. And I'm thankful every day that, I have kids because of nutrition and the interventions we were using. So I try to do the same thing, help people navigate this complicated world where we tend to eat, things that we like that might not be very good for us. And it's very difficult to know what to do. I'm trying to build and make it simpler. And I hope I can help millions of people in the end to eat better and maybe reverse the disease they have today, like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and so forth.
It's such a beautiful story that you share. And there's nothing better than having a conversation with an entrepreneur who's had a problem and converts it into an opportunity and then turns it into a business. So what a lovely story. Thank you for sharing that with me and our listeners. My second question has permanent residency on the show because I love imperfection. So tell us what imperfection shows up in Ari's heart-centered leadership.
Yeah, I mean, I built multiple teams and been, I think, very lucky that many people, they find an area that they work on and then they spend 40 years in that one field. I worked in and built companies in 5 different fields now. So it's always interesting when you start, the playbook. You know how to do things. You know how to hire good people. You know how to raise money. You know how to sell. Those are things I'm quite good at, and I have people who are really good at that than me. But then there's always a lot of unknowns. And I think what I really like most about my journey is that I do have the beginner lens open all the time. So you can look at things as a 5-year-old, or you can look at things as a 90-year-old. And the 90-year-old will likely say that, well, it's like it has always been. And the 5-year-old will always question everything and ask 10 times why. And if you do that in everything that you build or you work on, you're going to be much better at it. Because nobody knows. We have a lot of these beliefs that we do things because they always been done this way. Mm-hmm. And that's usually wrong. Sometimes it's correct, and we have found a perfect way to do things, but 99% of the times it's not the case. So I think my leadership style, my way to navigate business and life is always to ask why and make a lot of mistakes and try to learn from them.
I'm a big proponent in failing forward because I think when we fail, much like you've done with building your companies, you can convert everything into a learning opportunity. So I love that. Okay, my third question is, I want you to share with the listeners a little bit about your journey and research and where you're going, specifically with the intersection of food and AI. And what message would you like to share, or what nugget can you put kind of in our toolkit for educating us today?
Yeah, let's take a step back and think about the macro first. We are living a very interesting time. We have a healthcare system in the US where we spend almost $5,000 billion a year on healthcare. 95% of that money is spent on the last 2 years of your life. So we literally are spending money only on people who are sick. And we are getting really good at helping people to live more years after they have cancer. We are getting really good at that. That's a super valuable thing to do. But cancer is killing maybe 15-20% of people. Lifestyle-related illnesses are killing 70% of people. And we are spending 3% of the money today on preventative healthcare, trying to help people before they get too sick to be healed. And we're trying to spend all the money on healing the people who are too sick to be healed already. And that is a very odd way of thinking about it. I get why we do it. We have a system where we have payers, we have the government payer, we have the pharma, medicine, and then we also have the doctors, hospitals. And the whole incentive is about how do we heal sickness? It is not a healthcare system, it's a sick care system. So if we agree on that point, then we can start thinking about what could we do. Today, 80% of Americans are overweight. We just passed the threshold of 50%, half of adult Americans are obese, BMI over 30. Most of those people are likely going to live less long than their parents. First time in human history that happens. First time in human history, apart from the Second World War and the Black Death in Europe, our life expectancy has declined because of COVID, overall unhealthiness, and opioid epidemic, and suicide in the US. We have lost 3 years in the last 4 years. If the same trajectory continues, we won't be born anymore because, the life expectancy will go to zero. Of course, it won't happen like that. But, the point is that this is unprecedented. There's no other country in the world where we have lost that has lost that much life expectancy. Even the war-ravaged country of Syria has not lost as much life expectancy as we have lost here. That is pretty alarming. And in my opinion, we should have a national emergency like we have on few things today, also on health today. We need to do something about this. We are now something like number 50 in the world on life expectancy. The Japanese men today are living over 10 years longer than the men in the US on average. And we have some cohort of people in the US who are living 20 years less than the men in Japan. What would you pay to live 20 years longer? Health years. A lot of money. So this is the idea that, only way to solve this is to start thinking about the prevention and focus on nutrition, which is one of the key pieces. Today, we subsidize things like, sugar production, certain oil productions, and corn that are causing us to eat very, very affordable food that is concoction of, super hyper processed food that is making us sick. So we pay our government dollars to subsidize food that makes us sick that will cost 5 times more at the back end of healthcare. Does that make any sense? No. So, but it's very difficult to change because the world, of course, is, like many people say, I said already at the beginning, that's how we always done it. We can't change this. There's no political will. There's no will from the medicine. There's no will from the big food. So it has to be done by people like us here listening. We have to take these things into our own hands and make good decisions. And my company is trying to do a small thing in this world where we help people make better decisions by using data. And I think the key point here is that we know the situation is dire. We can look in a mirror, we can look at the scale. We know we weigh more than we would like to weigh. And that's 80% of people. Nobody wants to be obese. And nobody's obese because they are lazy. They are obese because it's a sickness. It's a chronic condition. Like nobody's looking at somebody and saying, you have cancer because you're lazy. No, nobody does that. So we have to change the way of thinking these sickness and make them labeled as chronic disease. treat them as disease, not treat them as, something that happened to you that didn't happen to me. So those are some of the points that I'm really looking today and trying to have an impact. But they're very difficult things to move because the status quo is very intact.
Absolutely. And it's what you said, it's where we're spending, the government dollars. It's almost a backward way of thinking. Well, I'm glad that you're in that field and pushing things along. And again, it's another reason I wanted to have you on the show, because we have an outreach to 65 countries. So we're going to get your message out there for you, which I'm very happy to do. Okay, my last question is, what education or advice do you feel would have helped you as a young boy?
I think we are now in this world, and you alluded AI earlier. So AI is kind of becoming this big change factor, X factor in a way for world. I think I'm right if I say that world and humankind has invented two things: fire, wheel, industry, and then AI. I think it's among those two things that have changed everything. And if that's the case, then I think we need to think about education in a whole nother light than we did back in the days. Because frankly, it doesn't really matter. Of course, it's nice to learn to do 1 + 1 = 2. Nice to learn the long deviation and, even algebra. But in the end, the AI will be much better than any of us on math, for example. It'll be much better than us on reasoning of complicated things. It's already getting better than any human can be. It already has more information than any human can ever hold. So that idea that we are memorizing things, it's going to be silly. And we can look back 100 years later, we're like, well, how silly was that? But what we need to learn to be is to be learning machines. We need to be better at learning and have these ideas like a thirst of knowledge. And I think that's what I try to, because I look at my son, he's 9. He's like me, like very voracious builder. He plays with Legos and builds robots and stuff like that every day. We don't have any screens at home. We haven't watched like 3 movies my son was 9 years old ever in his lifetime. We don't play any games. I spent 20 years of my life in video games. We don't play any games. We go outdoor, we play. We write a lot, we read a lot, paper, not digital. So that's how we live. And I think, for him, I try to give him education that he could learn to know what he wants to do in life, learn to know who is he as a person, try to find things that he really cares about, and then spend time on those things. Because in his lifetime, he will likely live 150 years or more, because we're going to expand life expectancy quite a bit with all these things happening now. And with AI doing most of the labor, it will be a very different world that he will be growing up than I did.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the best part of that response for me was, I always love when people use the word be, because we are human beings and we're not meant to become human doings. And I'm a yoga teacher, and I believe in that proponent of mindfulness. And I love the way that you're raising your son. And, you're not doing what most people are doing with screens, et cetera, because you want to show him the virtue of patience and quality time. And I think the biggest thing that I loved what you said was you want him to know and figure out who he is and what his interests are. What a lovely way to grow up. That's beautiful. Okay, I'm going to ask you my fun Fab 4 questions so our listeners can get to know you outside of your leadership and entrepreneurship that you're building. First question, what's one practical tip you could give our listeners to embrace being a heart-centered leader in their daily life?
Try to make you useless in the office by giving other people the power and helping them to lead instead of you doing it. Because in the end, that's the only way to become bigger than what you can do yourself. Absolutely.
Beautiful. Okay, if your leadership style had a theme song, what would it be?
I'm really bad at music. That's my big weakness. But I think probably would be more like a haiku.
And everybody loves music. We all have our own genre or something that we love. So it was a fun question I had to throw in for this season. Okay, my third Fab Four question. What would you summarize as the key takeaway from our conversation today or lesson that you want to leave with our listeners?
There's one thing that I talk a lot about in different forums, and I try to talk to my team members and my wife, which is this idea that us humans are very bad at understanding logarithmic chains. We understand the linear chains really well. We can predict really well what happens tomorrow. So if we ask a million people in the US today, what is the value of Tesla stock tomorrow? We're going to get 99.8% accurate result. But if we ask a million people today, what will, let's say, the health system look like in 50 years? We will likely get 99.9% wrong answer because we don't understand compounding effect of change. And there's a wonderful book. There's already a little bit dated, but it's called Slow Pace of Fast Change. And that talks a whole book about this topic that we predict really well a couple of years ahead, but we really suck at predicting 10, 15, 20, 30 years ahead because life is so very different than it used to be. My dad is 75 years old. He was born in a small town in Finland. For the first 5 years, they had no electricity. He saw a first car when he was 6 years old. Think about it. They had oil lamps at home to have light. And today, he's a professor of, technology, and, he was the first person in his area to go to university ever. And in his lifetime, Finland, as a small country in Europe, went from being agrarian society to becoming one of the leaders in technology in the world. So that's just how much happens in a lifetime. And I think the speed today is maybe threefolded what it was then. So I can't even fathom what the world will look like for my kids.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. And it makes me think about how people struggle to live in the present moment. And a lot of people still struggle with remnants from their past. And I think it's a combination of impatience and fear and not wanting to look out to know what the world's going to look like. I think it's a very interesting topic. And I do agree with you. And I even see it in business with the C-suites that I work with, kind of post-COVID. They're not looking out as far with their visionary leadership because, like you said, there's just so much change and you have to kind of pick one thing and just not only acclimate that, but really make it part of your vision or strategic plan to execute. And there's just so much change, and AI is really making it a different world. So I do agree. It's been delightful to meet you, and I wish you and your family continued health. And I knew this was going to be a wonderful conversation. And my last question, I'm going to have you finish this sentence to close out the show. Heart-centered leadership is?
It's the way of showing the world who you are.